What's up, everybody? Today we are installing the ARB Twin Compressor from Agile Offroad in our Sprinter van. The hood's up. I'm gonna let the van sit for at least 20 minutes because I will be disconnecting the battery. But let me quickly walk you through everything that you get when you order the kit directly from Agile Offroad. Now, it's important to note, this is not sponsored. I paid for this, but I wanted to give you all the insights on how to hook this up the way that I'm gonna be doing it, which is gonna be slightly different than maybe your typical application, because Agile does set you up with the switch that will go inside the van, like a stock looking Mercedes switch, but I'm going to be wiring mine up to my AuxBeam 6 gain. So this is everything you get in the kit. So you got the compressor here. I already have it upside down because I'm going to be installing the mounting plate. You get a bunch of wires. We'll get into the wires a little bit later, but you do get the switch set up here, and then also they kind of pre-wire up the power and ground. You do get the steel braided lines for the 144. So this is for the air chuck hookup that goes directly inside of the van, and then this particular one will run all the way to the back. You get the breather kit. That is a nice little add-on. So instead of just having just the filters that would attach directly on the compressor right here, you actually have a breather kit that runs this inside of the air intake for the HVAC system. So that's really nice, along with all the fittings. You get the air chucks along with the dust covers. I've already went ahead and attached my dust covers, but these are the air chucks. You get the hardware for mounting the chucks themselves, and then you get just a bunch of bolts for attaching everything. You got a set of these black bolts that are going to be for mounting the actual compressor to the plate itself, and then you get a series of nuts and bolts which will be for the actual mounting. And then you do get a filler hose, but I will be doing a dual, maybe even a quad setup that this compressor can handle all the way. You'll need some standard tools. I'll leave those linked down below, but nothing out of the ordinary. Maybe with the exception of something like this. This tool is a tool that you use when taking off things like your side plastics, but this is really good for pulling some of those internal pins. So in the instructions, which I will also link down below that aren't very descriptive, you do remove your air box, which has some bolts in the back, and then the compressor will mount down there. So you will have to remove the fender from inside of the passenger side, but everything will get mounted down there. I will then wire everything over to my AuxBeam, and then I should be ready to rock and roll. Okay, so when mounting the compressor, the plate itself goes in the van like this. These tabs that you're going to want removed because you're going to want to expose those bolts, and then the plate itself gets mounted in just like that. So there's this hole. Let me mount this up just a little bit. Not gonna so if you see that. So there's a hole right there that's in the fender well. That's gonna go to this rear hole here, and then the movable holes are the ones that are going to get installed down there, and that's how that's going to go. And then there's this other bolt down here which just goes to the fender well. But you do want to install the plate first, knowing that you want the filters going towards the engine. We're gonna go just like that, because when this is flipped upside down, I want these coming towards the front of the van, because these are the holes that you bolt into there. Those are going to be the new tabs for those for that wiring harness that's already in the van. This goes down to that lower piece on the fender, and this is that rear bolt. But you need to have everything bolted up first, and so it's going to go just like that on these 10mm bolts that I went ahead and put a little bit of Loctite on. Okay, so I got the compressor mounted. I've gone ahead and also added in the fittings. This is the splitter that takes air up to the front chuck, to the rear chuck, and you make sure you put some Teflon on there. Crank it down, but don't obviously crank too tight. And then I went ahead and did the breather fittings also, so that those are ready to rock and roll. I've removed the air box, so now you can see the space in here much more easily. So we're going to be mounting to that hole there, that hole, and then these rear ones here, these front of that wiring harness. You do need to pull out the fender well, but you don't need to pull the whole thing out in my opinion. You just got to undo this. There's a couple screws here, and then you'll pull it back. So that's the rear hole, and then you can see the front hole over there. So it's gonna be tricky to do this by myself. I may have to have a friend or a neighbor come over really quick just to help bolt those two down. But let's go and get the compressor mounted.
A few moments later.
All right, finally got it all in. This was pretty hard. This probably took me almost an hour to do, and I did need to get help. That bolt obviously was easy. The one back there was easy because I just had help, and just used the supplied washers. You can probably barely see that because it's pretty dark in here. The tricky ones, these ones here, were really tricky, but it's just one of those where you just got to really take your time and get it in, and just get everything threaded. But all four are in there. The compressor is nice and sturdy, obviously. So now I'm going to run the air lines, install the breather, put the air box back in, and then wire it up. Okay, so we got the compressor mounted. We started to run all the wires. Ground right there. And this is the wiring harness that comes with it, and then this is the one for the switch. Now what I'm doing differently is I'm not running it into the cab to a stock switch. I'm running it over to my AuxBeam. So you can see I got the air chuck all mounted up, drilled in, but then everything runs across, and my AuxBeam, my 6 gating, is right here, and all you need is just that purple wire. That's it. Okay, and I just tested it. We're going to test it again. We're going to come turn on the van, and then my 6 gang is right here. That's going to turn on here in a second because it's based on the ignition. And there it goes. This is the one that I wired to the compressor, so I'm going to flip it on. Come over here, get our air hose, because I switched it on. Now we have air, but like I said, I'm going to be running a dual system, but this is just the stock one. This would simulate if it was plugged into a tire, so you can hear you'll hear the compressor turn on right now. Cool. So now all I got to do is put the air box on and run the line for that, and we're all done. All the instructions that Agile provides, which I'll leave in the description below, they're all pretty much straightforward. But also, like, once you kind of look at how this all lines up, it all really makes sense. You do have to end up cutting the hose for the breather, and I ran mine to the back, and my breathers filters are right there inside of my HVAC filter, and then all the other wires are just tucked up inside there. I do recommend put the T on, put all your fittings, do all your fittings before you actually drop the compressor in. That makes a world of difference. But outside of that, I mean, everything else is pretty straightforward. Running the steel braided line to the back, it's pretty much a no-brainer. Mounting this plate here, also it's just super straightforward. But the steel braided lines are really nice. This is the one for the front, and then the other one runs, and then it runs down there, down the passenger side. I crisscross where the flanges for the exhaust, over the gas tank, and then out the back. And then that's it. Everything's done. Took me about 2.5 to 3 hours, all said and done. But you do need one person to help you at least to get those bottom 2 bolts from the bottom. But everything's put back together, and we can call this project done. So if you have any questions, hit the comments down below. But I hope you guys found this informational. But again, the big one here, the big piece to remember is I wired this into my AuxBeam 6 gang. And at that point, there's only one wire that I needed in order to make that work, outside of hitting up power and ground. So I ran the power for the compressor to a nut that's also running. It's for the power that also runs to the winch. So it's hot wired in, so it's ready to rock and roll. And then when the AuxBeam turns on, I'm able to then turn on the compressor. And the only wire out of that second harness that you need is the purple wire. That's it. everything else can be cut away. If you're running it to a switch, then you need to do the ground and you need to run power to that switch so the switch will light up. But for me, again, I was running it to an AuxBeam 6-gang, and it was just the purple wire into the AuxBeam box. That was it. And then when the engine turns on, my AuxBeam turns on because I have it wired to ignition hot. And you would also want to run the compressor with the engine on because it wants a true 14 volts of power. But outside of that, check all your airlines once you're done. I checked everything. I sprayed it with a little soapy water. I'm good to go. You know, plenty of Teflon tape. Don't over tighten anything. But outside of that, super straightforward. 2.5, 3 hours, maybe 4. But you know, yeah, super easy. Well, once it's all said and done. So again, hope you guys found this informational and helpful. And I guess we'll catch you in the next one. See you later. Peace.